Hey, AJ.
Hello.
So we might have a little bit of less attendance today because I went into Zoom and we only had 5 registrants.
Oh no, wait, how does that work?
I have no idea. There's a weird glitch between YM and Zoom. I had to manually add everybody. So they've gotten their confirmations if they needed the confirmations, which I'm thinking is what happened with that one lady who was asking, like, hey, what gives? I'm trying to register, but they're saying my email's already used. So I'm thinking
Mm.
that's the reason. Um, but oh well, it happens. It happens.
Uh, I hope Wildcat hops in on the right time.
Oh,
Is there
well,
still a waiting room? Okay, cool.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah, we had one person from Haskell like register like very recently, so I just like went ahead and posted on my social media real quick.
Awesome.
Yes.
All right, let me go ahead and look at the script. Pretty simple. Pretty simple.
Yeah.
I would like us for next year for us to revise the um land acknowledgement
Yes.
because it seems kind of whack, not gonna lie.
Kind of whack.
And
Fair,
especially,
fair.
I don't know, I feel like we should be changing it pretty often.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, because it feels like, I mean, I have a thing about land acknowledgements, but
Yeah.
it's just me. They're important,
They
but I'm
they
also
either hit or miss, and then it depends on like who does it.
exactly. I'm also like, if you don't have anything to really, I'm a huge proponent, I'm a huge supporter of land acknowledgements if it has something impactful that follows it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if we include like the cultural advisory commit work group, the NIAC, and how we do so much with it, then yeah. But it just seems like, oh, it's this. Just me. Just me. I had that problem with ASU too. Just me. Just me. Just me. All right. Well, I have our jams playlist up. Let me try to find a song that's not Come and Get Your Love. Because I can listen to that all day. Okay, perfect. Awesome. 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 Were you able to read a little bit more or watch that video?
Um, nope. I was expecting the debrief after, and then yeah, it was just then I had to like get ready a little bit so I don't look crazy.
Yeah, actually, let me go open my window so I don't look.
Hi, Wildcat. Hi, Dr. Wildcat. You're muted.
Yo, Fasson, Sangele. Good
Hi.
afternoon. How are
Good.
you?
We're doing great. We're so excited to have you today.
Oh man, this will be fun. We're gonna have
Yeah.
fun. Yeah,
Yes, we will.
absolutely.
When do we not?
Exactly. It's all you got, even when it's hard work, you've got to make it fun, right?
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Exactly.
for sure.
Yay. So we're just we'll have the PowerPoint up and just kind of explain what's going on today.
Okay.
Then I'll introduce you, and then you can come on and speak a little bit about your book, and then we'll also open it up for questions if people have questions, and then we have some for you as well.
Okay. A key question. How long would you like me to speak?
However long you need, as long as it doesn't exceed like 40 minutes.
Well, I'm going to try to do it in 25 or 30, and that
Yep.
way we'll have plenty of time for questions. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that works.
Okay.
Will you
Good
have a
deal.
presentation, or are you just going to be speaking?
I'm just going to talk.
Okay.
I will keep your attention. I guarantee you.
He's gonna
I
do
believe
tricks
it.
over there.
Really talking with his hands.
He's
Just
gonna
kidding.
stand up at some point. Just give us all sacred teachings. Stand on his head too.
Yeah.
Awesome. We have some people from Haskell who registered, so we'll see who all shows up.
Yeah. Good deal. I'm going to freshen up my water real quick.
Sounds good.
And we are now at noon, so I'll go ahead and start the jams.
Okay.
And let me share my screen first. Share sound. Oh, I think this is so cool. We'll do that. There you go. Do you see me on the?
Yes.
I love it.
How did you do that?
So you have to do it while you're sharing your screen
Mhm.
in order to make yourself tiny. I'm
That's
hoping.
cool.
I love it. I love it. Okay. Let me know if y'all can hear the sound and if it's going to be too loud.
Hear it?
Yeah.
And it's at a good volume. Do you want me to record or do you want to record?
I'm already recording, but please record just in case technology decides to take me.
Okie doke. I'm gonna go ahead and go off screen and mute myself. There's someone in the waiting room, so.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and start the webinar now.
Okay, sounds good.
Hello and welcome everyone who is joining us live and those who are watching the recording. Today's event is our first SACNAS Native Initiatives Book Club. This event will be discussing the book On Indigenuity, Learning the Lessons of Mother Earth with Dr. Daniel Wildcat. Before we get started, let me go ahead and introduce our team. Yat Elizabeth Johnson Native Initiatives Manager, SACNAS Shithnatnish. Adana and a nishlana a kiani nishla do tsanadin and bashishtin torjini dashiche do torjini dashiche. Chanela. Twatat den ashat and the hosdoishovan. Hi everyone, my name is Elizabeth. I am Diné or Navajo, and I am the Native Initiatives Manager. I'll go ahead and pass the mic off to my colleague.
Dakyapi, Lakoya Tau Choko Tawi Machiapi na S Lashito Alexander Holder Machiapi, Malakota na Kirikirish na Hochangada Uyan Macha, Nahayon Chante Washte na Pe Chusa Pi, Ma Kedapana Noob, Naga Job, Wa'u Nankshana, Shunkjunk Hiki Karach, Wa'u Nankshana, Lawrence, Kansas, Eggy, Hachiaje. Good afternoon. My name is Alexandra Holder. I'm a Lakota, Winnebago, Wichita, Second Fox in Northern Cheyenne. I just introduced myself in Lakota as well as in Ho-Chunk. And I'm excited for everyone to be joining us today. We have a very special guest, and I hope you all take away a lot of wonderful things from today.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I would like to first talk about SACNAS. So we were founded in 1973, and we are a STEM organization dedicated to fostering the success of Chicano, Hispanic, and Native Americans, from college students to professionals, and attaining advanced degrees, careers, and positions of leadership in STEM. We are a fully inclusive organization committing to achieving true diversity in STEM. As the nation's largest multicultural and multidisciplinary STEM diversity organization, SACNAS aims to create space where all our members, volunteers, and partners feel they belong and can embrace their intersectional identities. In order to really achieve true diversity, we do this through a variety of ways, such as webinars like this, as well as our programming that we host year long. Our biggest thing is that we are changing the face of STEM, and we're looking at it through intersectional ways, especially through culture. And through the Native Initiatives programming, we enjoy bringing you webinars like this, bringing students over to the conference, as well as highlighting them throughout the month, which if you follow us on SACNAS, Instagram, LinkedIn, X, Threads, you'll get to see some of our wonderful Native Indigenous members that we love to highlight. SACNAS, we are based out of California, which is the original homeland to over 200 tribal nations, bands, and rancherias of Native American Indigenous people. We would like to take this time to acknowledge the original inhabitants of the various regions in which we all live and work, and honor the rich culture from the Indigenous people across the country. You'll see in the link or in the chat a link to native-land.ca, where you can learn more about the Indigenous lands that you reside on. And lastly, I do want to talk about becoming a member. Not only do you have to become a member to be eligible for any of our SACNAS programs, such as travel scholarships to attend the National Diversity in STEM Conference, you're also eligible for our mentoring opportunities, which is embedded in everything when it comes to SACNAS. And if you are an early career, mid-career person, or you are just received your doctoral degree, we have professional leadership institutes that will make you eligible as a member. If you are at a tribal college or university and you're interested in starting that membership, but you experience a barrier when it comes to paying that annual fee, you can learn more about getting that support. Whether you're at a TCU or not, we can always find a way in order to alleviate that barrier for you. And lastly, becoming a member, you can save $100 on registration if you become a member before conference. You can find out more by becoming a member at sacnas.org/members. And I will now pass it off over to AJ to introduce our wonderful speaker.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So today I will be introducing Dr. Daniel Wildcat. Dr. Daniel Wildcat is a Yuchi member of the Muscogee Nation out of Oklahoma. He is an Indigenous scholar, writer, and professor at Haskell Indian Nations University. In 2013, he was a Gordon Russell Visiting Professor of Native American Studies at Dartmouth College. Dr. Wildcat received an interdisciplinary Ph.D. from the University of Missouri at Kansas City. He is a noted speaker on traditional ecological knowledges. He is currently the principal investigator for the Rising Voices Changing Coast Hub at Haskell. He is the author and editor of several books: Power and Place, Indian Education in America with Vine Deloria Jr., Destroying Dogma, Vine Deloria's Legacy on Intellectual America with Steve Pavlik, Red Alert, Save the Planet with Indigenous Knowledge, and On Indigenuity, Learning the Lessons of Mother Earth, which argues we need ingenuity to address the destructive character of the Anthropocene. Dr. Wildcat was also a previous professor of mine while I attended Haskell. With all that being said, I will now pass the virtual floor to Dr. Wildcat.
Oh, Sunlay, Koyasate. Thank you so much, AJ, for the nice introduction. And so, Basam, Sangeli, Zoyaha, Yuchiha, Muscogee, Shadane, Boshita Adene. Good afternoon, beautiful people. My name is Dan Wildcat, and I am, as AJ said, a Zoyaha Yuchi member of the Muscogee Nation or Creek Nation of Oklahoma. And just honored to be here today to share, a little bit of my work with you. And I'm really looking forward to having lots of good discussion. That's when the learning really occurs. So I think I'll just try to hit some basic points. Hopefully they'll be provocative enough to encourage some of you to ask questions. But let's start with kind of one of the major themes I have developed in the last decade in my work, and that is, why do I claim that indigenous knowledges, and let's use the plural, unless we're talking about kind of the underlying framework of indigenous worldviews, philosophies, and knowledges, I think we should probably use the singular, because Dene knowledge is nothing like Lakota knowledge. Lakota knowledge is different from Seminole knowledge. Why? Well, because our knowledges were born of an experience of a particular people in relationship to a place over hundreds and thousands of years, over many generations. And so, these knowledges are very much about, that what I refer to as a symbiotic relationship between peoples and a place. When I say, learning the lessons of Mother Earth, what I mean is, I think that we live in the modern world. I'm sitting in my home office here, and I'm largely surrounded by what I like to refer to as a room full of mirrors, uh, walls, a ceiling, a light, a laptop with a camera and a microphone, my books. I do have a plant behind me. I've got to have some green here in this office. But I'm surrounded by everything that humans have created, right? Except for that plant and that earth that it's in that pot that allows it to grow, and the sunlight outside that window. It does depend on me to water it. But we live to a large extent today in environments where all we see is ourselves, what humans have made, what we have created, what we have designed. And I think this is part of the challenge we have today, is that, we're surrounded by life outside these walls, the land, the air, i.e. the wind, the water, the plants, the animals. No matter where you are on the planet, even in a very, very urban area, you can never really separate yourself from the land, the air, the water, the plants, and the animals. But ironically, we kind of live as if we are separate. We've separated ourselves. I call this in my work, I refer to it as we've created an insulated ignorance. So the first one of the key points I'd like to kind of play around with today is that I think our ancestors and even today, we have the opportunity to apply indigenous ingenuity or indigenuity if we start paying attention to our original instructions, to our first teachers, literally the land, the air, the water, the plants, the animals, the sun, the moon, the stars. And I think this is really important because I think today we're so much living in these roomful of mirror spaces that people forget to pay attention to what is going on outside these walls in that life that humans had no hand in creating. See, we created all this in here. We created our smart, so-called smart devices. Might say a little bit about that later. But, you know, we're surrounded by things we've made. That's the room full of mirrors effect. We begin to forget none of this is possible unless we are in right relationship with the land, with the air, with the water, with the biological life around us. And I think a lot of people take that for granted and they don't think about it anymore. They don't even experience it anymore like our ancestors did. So learning the lessons of Mother Earth in the first kind of most basic level is about encouraging our children and grandchildren today to re-engage, to reconnect, to relearn from our first teachers, that ancient life around us. And again, that's not indigenous romanticism. That's indigenous realism. And I think for this reason, you know, we desperately need indigenous knowledges today that are generated from our relationship and engagement with this, with our different than human relatives, our kin, really. I mean, so I don't have to tell SACNAS students this, but please don't let your, you know, your brothers and sisters, nieces and nephews, and your human relatives get caught up in this mistaken idea that we live in a world full of natural resources. If there's any, if you want an example of human-centered thinking, anthropocentric thinking, this idea that we live in a world full of natural resources is the most obvious example you could give. Resources for whom? Oh, that forest is a natural resource. That water is a natural resource. For whom? Oh, for us, of course, you know, humans. Oh, and we've got to manage that resource too. And we've got to figure out how to use or extract value out of that resource. Well, I think that kind of thinking is foreign in our indigenous intellectual traditions and worldviews. Because see, you don't try to extract value or figure out how you're going to use your auntie or your uncle or your grandma or your grandpa or your mom and dad. I mean, if you do, at a certain point, you know, you're not going to be welcome because they want to be respected. They want to be loved. And they want you to be mindful and express some care in your relationships. And I think if you really take the, you know, the most exciting development in biology in the last century, and that was Watson and Crick's discovery of the double helix and the recombinant processes of DNA, we now know that what, AJ's relatives, in those beautiful invocations and prayers that will be offered before events, when they say that phrase, I know many of you've heard it before, Mitakiwa Oyase, they're saying, for all my relations, not just human relations, all my relations with the earth, with the water, with those plants and animals, with those different than human relatives we have. Again, that's perfectly consistent with modern biological science. It's just that we've known it for a lot longer than modern scientists in our own intellectual and worldview traditions. So learning the lessons of Mother Earth is going to be the most important thing that we can do, but we can't do it unless we figure out a way to step outside these room full of mirrors that we inhabit or that we find ourselves in most of the day, and begin to reconnect again in a very, very real, I'll even use the word scientific manner, by starting to really pay attention to what rivers, wetlands, plants, and animals can teach us. The biggest kind of development, I think overall in science, along with this kind of, DNA development in biology, is probably the growing recognition by a lot of scientists that it's much more useful to understand the earth, our Mother Earth's beautiful life systems, as really a living system. It's not a machine. It's a living system. And living systems are different than machines. And I think we forget that, particularly now when people are talking about artificial intelligence. Folks, remember, the key term there is artificial. It's human-made intelligence. And it's not all humans, it's just some humans. It's those people who are designing those systems and creating the algorithms that drive those systems. And those algorithms have embedded in them the worldviews of the people that are creating them. That's a problem. That's a problem as we think about, quote, artificial intelligence. Because I don't know that, we so much need artificial intelligence as we need a restoration of human. And yeah, I'll use the term natural intelligence, an intelligence that is connected to this larger life system that we understand isn't about us. It's not all about us, but yet we do have responsibilities if we're going to live as responsible members of that larger life system on this planet. So let me kind of tell you where I'm going with this, because I don't want anyone to be I want to disabuse anyone who's hearing this to say, oh, Wildcat's this kind of indigenous Luddite. He wants to go back to the past. He wants us to reject all technology. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. You're missing my point. So let me be explicit. Here would be a very brief view of the history over the last 10,000 years. That's a short part of our human history. But let's begin this way, that, the reason, one of the first principles of understanding our planet is the incredible biological and environmental diversity of the landscapes and seascapes that make up our beautiful, this thin blanket covering our mother, the biosphere. And in conjunction with that life diversity was human diversity. because humans in particular places, very different places on the planet, developed their identities, their cultures, their worldviews, based on the term, AJ's heard me use this before, what I like to call the nature-culture nexus, this kind of symbiotic relationship humans have with the balance of life that they depend on, the nature-culture nexus. So, let's remember that if we're going to talk about the biological diversity of the planet, we should also talk about the cultural diversity of the planet. It's only been very recently in human history that the biological diversity, and consequently, by the way, in many respects, the cultural diversity of the planet has been in decline. So what explains that? Well, I think part of what explains it is, we are a species unlike the turtle, unlike the snail, unlike the spider, unlike the deer, unlike the bison, the salmon, who depend much more on our ability to make things to live well. Now, I think, humans are makers. We make things. That's part of who we are. It's part of the uniqueness of our species. And so we should never reject the fact that we are fundamentally makers. Okay? That's how we live on the planet in very diverse places, very different places. We figured out how to make clothing, how to feed ourselves, how to make dwellings, how to make tools, utensils. Now, so technology per se isn't the problem. The problem is, after our slow, kind of development of technology, a lot of things started happening about 500 years ago. One of those things is people started moving. We had the development of trade routes, primarily in Asia and in Europe, much more extensive, although we do have evidence that we had extensive trade routes here in the Americas too, between the South, the Middle, and North America. But nevertheless, I think when we first started developing tools and technologies, our framework for doing so was that larger family we saw ourselves in kinship with, the plants, the animals, the land, the air, the water. And so we were developing technologies that fit those places, right? Well, then humans, we advanced. Transportation, trade, cultural diffusion. At some point, and we don't need to put an exact date on it, but we can see that something begins to change. And that is, it's the lens through which we're thinking about technology. It makes a big difference if you think about, I want to develop a technology for this place so I can live well, versus thinking, oh, I should use my technology to change a place so I can be more comfortable, so things can be more convenient for me, so that as we enter the age of trade and commerce and begin to be much more mobile around the planet, people get this notion of material wealth, of money, what we might call capital gains. I jokingly say the primary framework for technology today is human convenience, human comfort, and capital gains. And if you can check the box on all of those, we say that's progress. But see, that's the problem, isn't it? Because it's progress for some of our human relatives, not all. And more importantly, it seems like, with the age of industrialization, we have seen a steady decline in the health of our different than human relatives, the plants and animals, the air quality, the water quality. So the age of humans so far has not been good for the balance of other life on the planet. Now we're facing this thing called global climate change. So here's the good news, folks. If you've heard that apocryphal quote attributed to Einstein, give me 5 minutes to kind of make some key points here, building on what I've shared with you. Let's start with an apocryphal quote. That means it's always attributed to Einstein, but there's no evidence Einstein ever said it, okay? And the quote goes something like this. He was asked by a colleague if he had any insights on how to solve a very complex physics problem. And his advice was, remember, you can't solve problems with the same kind of thinking that created them. You can't solve problems with the same kind of thinking that created them. We need a different way of thinking. Turns out the different way of thinking might be ancient intellectual traditions that have a different lens, a way of looking at this complex web of life we are a part of. So let me make 4 quick points and then let's open it up for discussion, okay? So indigenuity, it's a new term for ancient practices that our ancestors always had. They were makers, they were creators. They figured out problems. They had an incredible intellect. But the way they framed things was always about that place they called home. They weren't interested in leaving home to take a vacation. That's kind of an interesting idea, isn't it? If you want to really rest and relax, you've got to leave your home. I wonder what kind of world that is we live in, where, oh man, I've got to get some rest and relaxation. So I've got to leave my home. I've got to go somewhere exotic, somewhere different. Well, maybe that means that the way we're living isn't all it's cracked up to be. So let me make these 4 basic points and see if it makes any sense to you. And then we'll talk about it, okay? First point. Remember where I started with the, exciting discoveries in modern biological science, ancient wisdom to us, but the idea that, life on this planet is all related. We are all related. So I suggest to you that we really walk away from the notion of talking about human resources altogether. What we ought to talk about is our natural relatives. And if we move from a natural resource view of the world where, it's all about us, our progress, our human comfort, convenience, capital gains, then we might reframe our relationship to the land, the air, the water, the plants and animals in a notion of reciprocal rights and responsibilities. So first point, let's leave behind this really miseducative idea we live in a world full of natural resources. Science tells us we live in a world full of natural relatives. If we accept that, then we can take this tradition of inalienable, unalienable rights that humankind holds dear, and also add the indigenous counterpoint or complementary principle to that. And that is the fact that in Maizo-Yaha traditions, yes, inalienable rights are valuable, but they are always counterbalanced and coupled with the unalienable responsibilities you hold. When was the last time you heard a politician get up and talk to you about our human unalienable responsibilities? Again, I think this is much more consistent with modern science. Think of all the money and time we waste arguing in modern societies about who has the right to use what resource? Who has the right? Who owns that resource? That's not a discussion in our own intellectual traditions. The discussion is, what are your responsibilities to the earth? What are your responsibilities to the air? That question, are you in right relationship? So what are we going to do? Point one, we're going to leave behind this miseducative idea of living in a world full of resources and honor the fact we live in a world full of relatives. Then the second principle drops into place. We're going to complement inalienable rights with unalienable responsibilities, because now we live in a larger life system where we have responsibilities to our kin, are different than human kin, our natural relatives. Leave behind resources, adopt relatives, counterbalance inalienable rights with unalienable responsibilities. And then guess what? We can quit greenwashing, this greenwashing of sustainability that's going on. Every major corporation on the planet now has a sustainability statement. The problem is, I don't think we're talking about the same thing. I'm not sure I want to sustain what they want to sustain, that human-centered view of the world. I would suggest to you that we have the opportunity to employ technology and a whole generation of thinkers, of young people who exercise indigenuity. We can frame technology about this issue. Let's not get so fixated on human progress. That's the narrow way of thinking about it. Let's broaden that out and say, how can I create systems of life enhancement on the planet? That is an incredible challenge. Think of that. What would it be like to be able to live in communities, to use technologies that aren't constantly extracting resources out of our Mother Earth, but instead are living in a symbiotic relationship? What is the term we like to use today? Regenerative relationship with the earth. We need that desperately. And here's the good news for all of you SACNAS members. We need indigenous scientists. We need scientists who have that Lakota, that Ojibwe, that different lens. Dene, Pueblo, Seminole, Lummi, you name it, Passamaquoddy. Bring that lens into the world we live in. And I think we just might have the antidote to the destruction we see in this age of the Anthropocene. So we're not going to walk away from science. We're not going to walk away from technology. We're going to reframe it in the indigenous lenses we can wear. And we're also going to really look at developing partnerships with many different peoples who come to share a view much as ours. And I think with respectful partnerships, with the respectful allies, with letting our actions and behavior be guided not just by our mind, not just by reason, but as my dear friend and mentor used to say, as long as we engage spirit and reason, they're not mutually exclusive. If you're using one without the other, you're in trouble. It's engaging spirit and reason, spirit and mind to address these difficult challenges we have. And we're doing it for our children, right? Not just our immediate children, our nieces, our nephews, our little brothers and sisters, but that's 7 generations into the future. This is good work, folks. It's going to be hard work, but hey, young folks, I have a lot of faith in you. Roll up your sleeves, get to work and, you know, those that, like myself that are getting a little long in the tooth, we're going to be there to help, to support, to mentor, you know, as long as we're around. Sanle, Koyasate, thank you for listening to me, and I hope we can have a good discussion now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wildcat, for that awesome presentation on your book and all the things that you have to say with our relations to the earth. We're now opening it up for discussion. As you guys can see, you have ability to come on the screen and talk with us. So I'll hand it off to Elizabeth.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Wildcat. I personally really enjoy the empowering our Indigenous scientists to bring that new lens when it comes to changing.
Okay,
Sorry,
I think she's back.
Yes. Do you want to go ahead and continue, Elizabeth?
Thank you. So I really enjoyed that last point, which was empowering our Indigenous scientists to bring a new lens when it comes to change
Mhm.
the world, essentially.
Yes.
And that really fits in with what SACNAS is aiming to accomplish when it comes to advancing our STEM communities in
Mhm.
attaining those degrees, getting those positions of leadership in STEM. And I wanted to ask you, since you work with students specifically, what are the main issues that you're seeing with students when it comes to taking that next step in STEM?
Yeah, I think so for a lot of students, you know, particularly, so I'm going to speak very specifically, you know, about Indigenous students, but this applies to, I think, you know, so-called students of color and other students. I think that often the way science is presented even in the way it's taught and presented, is that it doesn't really necessarily engage young people in maybe an exciting, you know, or deeply relational way. You know, what you read the book, you take a test, we're going to do these experiments, but you know, it's kind of like, well, why? What's the point? You know, and I always had, so I took my biology, general biology. I got out of the service in 1972, out of the Army. Had the GI Bill, so I was going to go, wanted to go to KU, went to KU, and I remember that biology course I took. And when the experiments came into that part of the course, I was always asking the instructor, why are we doing this experiment? I mean, I heard the lecture and everything, but I'm having trouble getting the big picture. And I had this graduate student who was, you know, leading the lab. He was very honest with me. He says, well, look, just do the experiment, you know, so you got to do this methodology and learn this methodology. He says, you won't get the big picture till you go to graduate school. And I thought, what? What's going on here? I think for Indigenous learners, we want that big picture first. We want to get that sense of how we're deeply relational thinkers. Now, by the way, let's play to our strengths. In this day when everyone's talking about interdisciplinary, disciplinary work, the work I'm leading now at the Rising Voices Changing Coast Research Hub is all about convergent science. And convergent science in our practice includes Indigenous knowledges as science and the people who hold them as scientists. So it's pretty exciting work, right? Being funded by NSF. But I think it's that those of you that care deeply and are thinking about, you know, why you chose the field, think about ways in which we might be able to make some good, useful suggestions about curriculum and pedagogy and biology and chemistry and geology and meteorology, all of these sciences, because I think there's room for different ways of teaching, different ways of evaluating too. And I think too often we're just kind of trapped in an old way. Well, this is the way we've always done it, you know. And so my encouragement to young Native people who really want to get engaged in these issues is to, you know, take those biology courses, take those chemistry courses, and remember, you're being introduced a particular way of thinking about these things, but constantly remember how this knowledge would fit within your own Dene or your Pueblo or your Lakota, Dakota, Passamaquoddy, Seminole worldview. So I think sometimes the way science education is done can be off-putting sometimes to students who are deeply relational and big picture thinkers, because that's not the way we teach science. We kind of teach it with these little linear steps. Learn this, and then you'll learn this, and then you'll learn this. Oh, by the time you're a graduate student, you'll get the big picture. Well, let's start with the big picture, and then we can work backwards to kind of understand things. So I think that's a challenge. And I do want to say, I think today there's also the challenge of you know, I think a lot of young people, you know, deal with the kind of uncertainty of the environment we live in, whether we're talking about an economic environment, a political environment, the physical environment, global climate change. And I think they're often, you know, struggling with a lot of issues. And I think as an educator, you know, who wants to see young people be successful, you always have to keep that in mind. I don't think AJ will testify to this, but you know, I I I try to let my students know, you know, I understand they have lives outside the class that I'm teaching, right? Every teacher wants their class to be the most important class in the world. I know you take a lot of classes, right? And so I think what we need to do is to those of you that are going to go into education, science education, be professors, be researchers, just remember that. Just remember that, you know, there's nothing wrong with showing some kindness and care in the work that we do. And I think there are professors who think that's not my job description. I don't have to express care to anyone. I don't have to be kind to anyone. You just better get your assignment to me when I told you to get my assignment. Welcome to the real world. Well, no, that's not the real world. That's your little world. The real world is outside those walls. And I think that's an issue. I do think that's an issue.
I appreciate you mentioning that because you are 100% right. When we look at the medicine wheel or you look at any of the learning models that you can see when it comes to tribal colleges and universities,
Right.
you mentioned that we're multifaceted. We're humans. It's
Mm-hmm.
not just like, oh, I'm going to school to go to school. I'm going to school to learn,
Yeah.
to invest in myself later on. So thank you for reminding me also that I'm human and kindness is needed, especially with a world where like AJ and I, work in SACNAS, which is a national organization.
Right.
And each one of our members, especially the ones that are here live, those who are watching the recording, there's other things that they have as well. And just sitting down,
Absolutely.
taking that moment, like you said earlier, with a world that we are in when it comes to AI, when it comes
Yeah.
to the technosphere, we are constantly going. Like I had to close all of my desktop apps to make sure that I'm present and in the moment rather than like thinking,
Yeah.
oh, this email came in, it's going to pull my attention.
No.
Um,
No.
yeah, so I actually invite our attendees. You have the ability to come off mute and ask questions as well. AJ, you're also more than welcome to include. And Dr. Wildcat, I love hearing you talk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll give it a couple seconds if they want to say anything. If not,
Mhm.
I do have a question.
Okay.
I know people are. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Larissa.
Hi, I can't see myself on the screen, sorry. Hi, I'm Larissa. I'm a graduate student at the University of Houston. I really enjoyed reading this book, and my question is like, what kind of advice would you have? Like, a lot of us are working in this kind of structure that's been
Mhm.
built on like Western knowledge and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And the experience that I've had is that usually like professors and other people that you're trying to work with in this space are like, oh, well, like I know what I'm talking about. Like,
Right.
don't not really taking traditional knowledge that seriously. So
Mhm.
what kind of advice would you have for trying to navigate that space where you're trying
Okay.
to show people the importance of Indigenous knowledge, but they're just not really open to seeing
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. Well, let's face it, okay? And Larissa, that is a really important question. It's a deep question, and we really probably need to sponsor, some workshops, maybe, around this issue, for SACNAS members. Um, I'll give you my short answer, okay? And so I'll try to hit on the key issue I think you're raising. So just remember that again, in most R1 research institutions, large educational research institutions where you have graduates, conducting research and learning, quote, a discipline, just remember that is a very compartmentalized, you're right, structured system that you've been plugged into. And so it is not easy. It is not easy to bring another way of thinking into that. So understanding that, just understanding that this is a system in many respects, that is foreign to indigenous peoples. We never thought in boxes. We never worked in silos. Man, that's the embodiment of the way universities are built around the world today, sadly. So what I would say is you find your strength, okay, in finding fellow students, community members, and again with this technology, you can have mentors that might be 1,000 miles away, but who this would be a good use of the technology. One, I can think of a good use of where you can have communication, where you can talk about some of these things. I think what I want to suggest to you is, unless you get in a system where it is actually, doing harm to you, um, you know, I think just recognize, okay, this is one way they're teaching me to think about it. Doesn't preclude you from bringing in your own ideas and thinking about how you can work as a chemist, as a physicist, as a biologist, as an ecologist, uh, bringing in your own ideas. I will say this, in this kind of highly credentialized institutions we're in, um, Larissa, get that PhD, and then you can set up your own lab. You can start teaching the courses the way you want to teach your courses. And don't let anyone steal your voice, steal your power. And it is what it is, but understanding that gives you some leverage to navigate it, right? You're probably not going to change it, at least not right now, or certainly while you're in graduate school. But you can embody, That's why we need more and more Indigenous PhDs and teachers and researchers. When you start getting those monies to do your work, then you can start embodying that kind of knowledge and wisdom that you hold dear. I hope that helps.
It does. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Wildcat. Thank you, Larissa, for having a question. We have time for one more question. If Angelina, you don't have to talk. You could always put it in the chat if you have anything. I'll give you a couple seconds here.
Yeah, I'll give people a little while to put their thoughts together.
Yes. If not, I have a question. And it could be a short answer too. Dr. Wildcat, you teach at Haskell, and I've had the privilege of being in a couple of your classes. How I know we're out of we used to be fully online, but now we're kind of in person now. How are you
Right.
bringing that Indigenous perspective into the classroom and kind of shifting the way that your students learn in the classroom?
Yeah. Yeah. So what I try to do in my classroom is I try to really model more of a almost like more like a graduate course. I empower students, kind of the way it works for me. I give students an assignment and I say, you do the reading and then let's come talk about it. Okay. And the kinds of readings I do are of that nature. Okay. So I don't use textbooks. I use books written by Indigenous thinkers and articles written by Indigenous thinkers. And so, what I try to do is empower my students to feel like, when you come into my class, I don't presume you're an empty vessel. I always tell my students, you may have heard me say this before. I said, I wish we were structured differently because I know every one of you knows something I don't because I'm not you. You have experiences, you have real knowledge that I don't have. And so if we were structured a little differently, you know, we'd have more time for you to tell me, share with me what you know. So I always try to hold up students to tell them that their experience is valuable. And I always tell the students, bring your whole selves to my classroom. And I understand in some days, there will be people who are having problems and maybe they don't want to participate because they're worried about something or something else is going on in their life. But what I try to do is I try to conduct my classes in a responsible and respectful way. And I've been using this term a lot the last couple of years of embodied knowledge. Try to embody in your life, in your conduct, and how you treat people and how you relate to the world. Try to embody that knowledge in your person, in your behavior, in your conduct. So I try to do that, and I think some students are maybe taken aback, when I tell them, I love them. I used to never do that. By the way, that's something for me that changed with COVID. I thought, I want students to know that everything, this is something that I learned. I knew it earlier, but again, sometimes you know things and you learn things, but maybe you're too timid to fully express them. But I was given license by a couple of my dear people I would consider elders who two different tribes who late in their life shared with me that they thought the most important thing they learned in their life and their attempt to understand, the world was that you've got to lead with love. And so I tell my students, be good, be safe, stay well. I love you. And I mean it. And when I'll come into the room, I'll often say, "Hey, good morning, beautiful people. How are you?" And I want them to know you are beautiful. You're a human being. You're a unique person. And I think that has an effect. I mean, I think it does. At first, they're kind of going, "Who is this guy? What do you mean? Good morning, beautiful people. Is he pulling our leg? Is he just trying to be cool?" But I think after I do that all semester, they get used to it. And I think they appreciate it. I'll tell you, we'll share you one story. I'm not going to mention the name, but this was a non-traditional student, a woman who took one of my classes. And when we did the student evaluations at the end of the semester, she wrote something that was so moving to me. She said, "I want to thank you, Dr. Wildcat, because I've been through some really bad relationships, a victim of domestic violence. And I always had these, image issues." And she said, "I just want to tell you, it meant the world to me when you would come in every day and you'd say, 'Good morning, beautiful people.'" She says, "Because I've had very few people in this world tell me I'm beautiful." So maybe that little thing, just that little thing, can be something that can give people, a lift. That little nudge to say, "Hey, you can do something. You possess beauty. You are beauty." And, as, some of my Dene relatives would tell me, right? Let's learn to walk in beauty. I think we should all try to do that. That'd be a pretty good world, wouldn't it? If we could all just walk in beauty. Now, that's indigenous wisdom, folks. That's indigenous wisdom. And in indigenous education, we should center that. We should center that.
Of course, thank you. And then Dr. Wildcat, he'll also often have his classrooms outside.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, and that led to this trickle effect at Haskell where we have outside classrooms now.
Yes.
So I think that's also another component that Dr. Wildcat brings to his classroom and his classes that he teaches.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any ending remarks? I'm gonna sign up to me.
No, I tell you what, it's been a delightful time to spend this time with you. And I will say, so the world right now we're living in, we just had a national election, right? Yeah, everyone knows that. It's very uncertain times. Just remember, I'll close with kind of a short version of a poem. You'll recognize it when I kind of give you the short version. The way I wrote a poem about beauty, indigenuity, by the way, just a quick word about this. So this is not so much a book as it is an extended essay. So it's just a lot of thoughts that I tied together. And I've told this story before, but I want to relate it now. I almost didn't finish Red Alert. Because I thought before I write Red Alert, I started Red Alert in about 2005, 2006. I thought, well, I knew what I was going to write about, but I thought, well, I better read the science first so that, I'm kind of up with the science. And after about 18 months, I was so depressed reading the scientists and what, climate scientists were saying we were headed to. I mean, I was going like, why am I even bothering writing this book? We're doomed. I mean, humans are just, we're in for it. And I really was thinking, I'm not going to write this book. Why am I writing this book? And again, my elders came to my rescue as I would talk to, people like Dr. Henrietta Mann, the legendary Billy Frank Jr., from the Northwest Indian Fisheries Commission, the dear Albert Whitehat from Sente Glasgow, Rosebud Sioux. You know, their reaction to me was almost completely uniform and consistent. What they said is, Dan, put down the science books and get outdoors. And that's exactly what I did. And it was when I got back outdoors again, started taking walks along the Kansas River with my dog, that I began to realize, hey, I'm just this one part, small part of this beautiful cosmos, this creation, this Mother Earth. And it started giving me some humility, but it started also making me think of how resilient Mother Earth is. And I thought, well, you know, there's going to be some damage done, but maybe even if we make it a little less damaging, who knows, we might save a few of our human and different than human relatives. And that's a good thing, right? So it's about it's not about saving the planet. It's about putting yourself in right relations. Now, what this story's about is about that time when I put the science books down, I got really interested in poetry and I started reading poetry. I started reading Pablo Neruda. I started reading Walt Whitman. I started reading all kinds of poets, okay? And even Arthur Rimbaud, who apparently the French poet created modernism and poetry. But I started reading all these poets, and I realized what I liked about poetry is they made very powerful points, and it wasn't this linear, rational prose. They just used words to paint pictures and to give you a feeling and a knowledge that maybe you can't get with a scientific graph. Another way of communicating. So this book has poems scattered throughout it. Okay, those of you who've read it, you've seen those poems, okay? And I wrote one that began with some words I just started saying in a meeting, and then I fully developed it. But I'll give you the short version. This is what I'd like to leave with. This is why I love my outdoor classroom at Haskell. So it goes like this. Beauty surrounds us. Much ugliness too. This our wise ones tell us. Both are real, but only one is true. The question is, which will guide you? The ugliness around you or the beauty surrounding you and abiding within you? That's the kind of message I want to give young people. Beauty surrounds us, much ugliness too, but as my elders shared with me, you don't turn your head away from the ugliness. You see it, but you never let the ugliness blind you to the beauty surrounding us and within yourself. I'd like to close with that.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Wildcat. Super powerful words to end this. I'll hand this off to Elizabeth to close us up.
Yes, thank you so much. I literally wrote that in my book. If anyone captured my book, you'd see that it's annotated up. I would like to ask all of our beautiful people here in the chat. I just shared a link. Please nominate so we can continue the conversation. Also follow us on social media if you wish to also continue the conversation. But in order to help with the key points that Dr. Wildcat mentioned in empowering and advancing the Indigenous lens, we want to ensure that we are bringing in Indigenous scientists, professionals, the journeys to show us where we can go, finding that mentorship, as well as just highlighting those individuals. So we do have a webinar speaker suggestion form. You can nominate yourself. If you are attaining your degree, We're not asking you to show us your diploma. All we're asking is for you to give us the opportunity to share your voice, to share your perspective and lens with our membership and audience. So that suggestion form is there. Thank you so much, Dr. Wildcat. Thank you, AJ, for putting this together. And I'm hoping that we get to do a book club again in the future. All right. Thank y'all.
Yay, thank you everyone. See you guys soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.